So in the interest of time, we'll press on because we edged a little bit into the next session there. So we've got Nigel Davies from the home team, who's next with the theme of technology change in learning organisations. You're clearly at home, Nigel, so look forward to your thoughts. And then after that, we've got lunch. So look forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you. Right, so it's now good afternoon, everybody, not good morning. And I dropped my phone. I'm just reminded that I'm between you and lunch, which is in a rather special place, given that it's this building. So I'm sure quite a few of you are looking forward to that. So I'll try and keep us on time. It's already been mentioned this morning, actually, by Jed, I think. But quick introduction on myself. I'm the CIO for Group Services, and I look after BTFS as one of my customers. So Neil is really my customer in this relationship. And I've been in BT forever, an awful long time. So if you cut my head off like a stick of rock, it will say BT all the way through. But I've got to say it's been a fantastic career in terms of starting life as an engineer and ending up moving through networks and platforms and planning and strategy and ending up in the world of IT and becoming a CIO is not a journey I thought I'd take when I started out in my career. So it's been a fantastic world and opportunity. But what it does ram home to me on a regular basis is that you can't sit still. You have to keep learning. You know, if you just be happy with your lot, the world moves on without you, and you have to go with it. If you don't, you're going to be in a very difficult place very quickly. So what I want to talk about today is not specifically FM related, but more broadly related to technology change. And the question just from the audience was around kind of how do you do, and in BT, you know, massive place. So I'd be interested to share how we go about technology change and some of the things we're doing, looking at ourselves in what is a massive organisation. So what I'm going to cover then is a quick bit about TSO and the area I work in, so technology services and operations. For us, and the perspective that I see from BT, the drivers of technology change, what is a learning organisation and how does that relate to BT, our changing philosophies, and particularly try and finish on some lessons learned, but hopefully find some time to ask questions as well before we get to lunch. So, what is TSO? Well, when we reorganised ourselves a few years back, as big businesses regularly do, we brought together the operations world and the IT world and to form a unit that effectively supports all what we call the lines of business. So you think about BT and it has its consumer arm and its business arm and its wholesale arm. Those are all customer-facing lines of business, as they're called. But sitting below those, effectively, is the technology service and operations team where I sit in. And we do broadly two things. We provide all the network and functionality that supports all the services that those teams and units sell, but we also provide all the IT that supports all those activities as well. So I think, picking up on Neil's point, you know, we're absolutely packed full of right-side brainers. It's a very, very interesting place to be, and some very, very big thinkers, but also we have to be very disciplined in what we do as well. We spend an awful lot of money. The budgets that we get through on an annual basis are pretty huge by a lot of standards, but we still have to use it wisely. Every single pound and every penny is checked and make sure we're getting the best value from it. So essentially, though, you know, we are the engine room, but in terms of what we do, we are very much trying to sort of change our approach and move in a different direction rather than being very much command and control, which has been maybe the world we've come from, a culture and philosophy that has driven the business a long way. There's a recognition that we're not in that world anymore. We're in a world of innovation and a world of change, and that change is going quicker and faster all the time. So we're in a world where, you know, continuous improvement, as we mentioned already, is absolutely key to what we do, and managing change through an organisation as big as BT is incredibly difficult. And sometimes we get it right, but a lot of times we get it almost right. And I'm going to be very open and transparent in what I've got to say today in how we do things. So moving on then, talking about the sort of drivers of change for technology in our world. They are changing themselves. You know, we're seeing mobile, as has been discussed today again, really taking over. Neil talked earlier this morning about BT, bringing BTFS back into BT from being Monterey a few years ago, and not having the technology really to support the business and what it needs to do. You know, the mobile devices that are used now connect all the engineers and all the field operatives. That's what they use to drive their activities, and that's what they need. They're completely connected and in tune with what's going on. But there's still a lot to do to make sure that we're feeding the jobs in the right way, to make sure that we are getting the best out of them, we're giving them the right information, that they are, whilst mobile, feel part of a connected world and part of a bigger culture, and they can access the wider things that need to go on. So, you know, we talk about hearts and minds as well as getting the job done and getting that productivity out of folks. So there's a lot that we are seeing that we need to kind of respond to in that space. From a customer perspective, you know, whilst I sit in maybe the engine room and sort of help driving and servicing my customers, absolutely, we have to keep the end customers' requirements in mind. Some of you folks here today are FM providers, some of you are technology providers. I'm sure everybody in this room absolutely relies on an end customer, and that's the we, from an IT perspective, very much try and focus our activities. So it's not about a transactional relationship. What did you want? Right, that's what you're going to get. What are you going to use it for? How is it going to work? Have you thought it all through? So I give Neil a bit of a hard time about what he's trying to do, as much as he gives me a hard time about what it is we're doing, what we're delivering, what the priorities are, and how quick he can have something. So pretty challenging world from that perspective, but the world is changing for us. Security has become absolutely massive. As you can probably imagine with BT and all the various customers we've got, with the TalkTalk incident of last year hitting the press, and apologies if anybody's in here from that area, but just recently, I don't know if people saw the news the weekend, but the government reported in the last year 2/3 of companies in the UK have had a cyber attack and lost or compromised data. So from our perspective, and it drives my customers mad particularly, we have become absolutely obsessed with security. Not that we weren't before in terms of what we did, but we are poring over everything we do and making sure that we are not leaving vulnerabilities. We've always had very robust policies, but being honest, you know, we don't always keep everything up to date. So when things become end of service life, when operating systems need updating, there are so many applications. There's a renewed focus to keep on top of all of that stuff to make sure that we are not compromising our data or our customers in any way. But that does pose a challenge for me, because that means that stuff takes a bit longer to get through the pipe. We don't have limited resources in that space. So security is a huge challenge. And if I link that to the cloud in the middle there and where the world is going, we are increasingly using cloud solutions and SaaS solutions. And again, linking that back to the security piece, that's a real challenge for us. How do we get the security we need? How do we get the confidence that our data is safe and secure and that people can't get access, whilst also putting ourselves in an agile position where we can take advantage of technology that's out there and move a bit faster than we might otherwise move? Because if we don't accelerate the pace that we move at as a big company, then a lot of smaller companies will nimbly run around us, and it might surprise you, but we don't like that too much. We're not very keen on that idea. So for us, it's a real challenge to get our heads around the balance of security versus the balance of moving from hosting everything ourselves and having huge data centers to having things hosted in a cloud environment and taking advantages of the options that brings to us. So moving on, so a learning organisation. What is it about BT that's a learning organisation? I mentioned a little bit earlier about perhaps command and control, and if I go back in my career, you know, we've been through many changes and seen huge growth and then a massive crash in the share price, and very much a struggle to survive, and then a rebuilding, and much more recently, also there's been the acquisition of EE and the drive to be a multi-technology provider and a converged services provider as well. That in itself has brought different approaches to the business on the way, and I can say some of them haven't been enjoyable to be part of, but others have. I've got to say, BT these days is for me a tremendous place to be, and not because it just pays the wages into the bank once a month. The culture is changing, And we're trying to get very much into be a learning organisation and picking up from what we do. So you're pleased to hear in the time we've got available, I'm not going to go through all the bullet points, but really for us, it's about learning from our experiences, about getting the benefit out of looking at what we do, looking at what we get it right, but also looking at what we go wrong. I mean, the gentleman was just talking about customer surveys. You've got to look at both ends of the spectrum. You've got to understand what you got right and maintain it and embed it, but also where you could improve and do it better next time. And that's actually become a daily routine as well as a big project routine in terms of the mop-ups we have and PIRs at the end of projects, etc. So for us, though there are certainly challenges in that, it's creating the time to have those reviews, to creating the time to allow people to actually just step back from the coalface, as it were, and just ask themselves, what is it we could have done better? Or what is it we didn't get quite right? How could we do it a bit differently next time? So that's become really a culture that's embedded, but we've got to make sure that in doing that, we do give people the support to do it, so there has to be sponsorship there to make that happen as well. But something that I'm certainly seeing is leading to benefits in what we do. But I talked about sort of changing philosophies and a changing culture. We've just gone through a relaunching of our values in BT, and we just centred on three things: simple, personal, and brilliant. And the theme today really is about sharing and collaboration, and that's really kind of the culture that we're adopting and driving within BT these days. And I find it a very much more refreshing space. But what I would say is it also leads to better results and better outcomes. The environment that we're in is changing. People's demands are changing. The technology people use is changing. You will see that with your customers as well. For the world of ERP and technology, and coming back to the sort of world of IT and the various solutions that we provide to support the business, if we look back in history, we very much went for saw niche providers in the earlier days, providing targeted solutions to particular problems, and then we had the big monolithic ERP suites that have come along and seen the massive growth of probably the two main providers would be Oracle and SAP in those spaces, providing pretty every solution you can kind of need, and looking to retain customers and give you everything they want. But we're kind of seeing a change in that philosophy now, and we're kind of challenging that ourselves, saying, is that the direction we want to go? Is it because we've got Oracle in most spaces that they actually want to go Oracle for the next solution, or whatever it may be? Or do we want to look at the smaller, more specific providers and what can they deliver? And an example of that would be our work with NJW, who are sponsoring the event today, that traditionally in a BI environment we would drive an Oracle solution to that area. But what we found with BTFS was that we could work more quickly and get to the solution faster, what we needed by using a smaller, more specific provider, and that's worked very, very well for us. So that's something we're seeing changing in terms of our philosophy. And I would encourage folks that are kind of wedded to maybe one provider and going down a specific route to think about the options available. It's certainly something that we are doing. But you've got to ask yourself, what do you really need in the middle of all that? What is it that actually you want to achieve at the end of the day? It's very, very easy to buy big, glossy stuff and find that you're only using really 10% of the functionality at the end of the day. And I think we're all guilty of that. We've got to make sure that we buy and use what it is we need and not just buy stuff for the sake of it. And for us, as a huge engine within BT, we have in the past bought software solutions and then customised the living daylights out of it to the point where we've got our own development and our own solutions going, and then we've created this monster which you almost can't control. We've still got a few of those lurking about the place now. We're very much driving the out-of-the-box solution. We've just changed completely last year our internal HR solution, and it has been painful. But we have stuck to out-of-the-box functionality and processes, so we're not customising, so we can stay on the global development path, we can stay on the update path, and we're not tying ourselves in knots. And an ongoing support cost, which is spiralling out of control, which certainly we've seen evidence of that in the past. So beware that is a difficult one. And I think for me, it kind of a quote from Charles Darwin there that you have to adapt, you have to change. You know, it is about not just sitting back as a big company or anybody within a big company and saying we do what we do. if we carry on just doing that, we'll be left behind. So we have to kind of innovate and change and develop. And I think we've heard that constantly through the threads of the presentations this morning. So for me then, lessons learned in technology change. I think it's very, I kind of like that quote from Henry Ford, really, that whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. It really is a hearts and minds thing. You have to kind of get everybody on board. So for me, if I look back at many of the changes I've made over the years, both in the technology world of networks and platforms, but also more recently in the world of IT and in the world of a CIO, then sponsorship is absolutely key. And you might think that, that these things are all blindingly obvious, but even in a big company, we still find it hard to get some of this stuff right. So sponsorship for change is absolutely vital. You have to have a buy-in from the very, very top, and then you have to have, that sponsor has to be engaged. I don't know about folks in this room, but I've certainly written business cases in the past where a senior manager has sponsored it and signed it off and say, yeah, I'll go with that, and then you don't see them again. Is that their fault, or is that mine for not engaging them? You have to have sponsors that are engaged and visible and championing the thing that needs to be done. You have to be very clear on what the goal was. I talked earlier about sort of buying solutions and creating things that then you only use 10% of. What is it you really need to achieve? What is it you're trying to get to? Be very, very clear about that, because it's very easy to create a massive set of requirements for something that actually really is a fairly simple solution. Enthusiastic amateurs. I'm one of those. I've not been in this looking after BTFS for that long. So I have to be very, very careful that whilst I can be objective and I can challenge Neil, I can challenge my other customers what it is that they want to achieve, and I get a little bit of knowledge about the business area that we're in and the technology that we might provide to solve that, I've got to be very, very careful that I don't suddenly define myself as an expert or don't sell myself as an expert to Neil. Secondly, on that point, there's a time and a place for actually all recognising that we don't know it all. And actually, we do need to bring in some expert consultancy. And certainly, in our world, we were awash with consultants many years ago, and we've kind of had a purge and threw from the balconies as a BT Centre as many as we possibly could. But it's still important to bring the right expertise in at the right time. But you have to be specific what you need and why. But it's a key thing for me, beware enthusiastic amateurs, because we work in our own worlds and we do our own stuff, and our horizon is what we see and what we do. And I think if I go back to being in BT all my career, I now see a very different BT around me, where when I started out, almost everyone had been in BT forever. Very, very few people were external recruits and brought outside thinking. Now I'm very much in the minority. Most of the colleagues I work with have only been in BT a few years, or tens of years at most, or in the tens. It's a different place, and that fertilisation of knowledge from other companies, other environments, is absolutely vital for me. So, but if you are in an area where you recognise that you see what you see, you also have to challenge yourself, saying, well, is there a bigger picture beyond that we're not seeing, and bring that to bear on what you're doing, and you might have to go out and buy it sometimes. I think don't get hijacked. I've certainly had experience in the last few years of doing a massive IT change project with great ideas at the start, but being constantly hijacked on the way, where you do all the workshops, you set it all out, you work with your provider, and there's loads of mobilisation enthusiasm at the front end, but it slowly, steadily peters out to a core team, core involvement, and then involvement of the massive operations folks, and this is not in the FM world, slowly starts to steer things back to the way they do it today, rather than going for the way we wanted to do it tomorrow. And you kind of get caught in that kind of tractor beam, really, and end up kind of moving further away from the philosophy you kind of started with, especially when you're talking about 2- and 3-year programs, which are big, long-term pieces of work. When it's shorter and quicker, yes, you can keep it on track, but it's very, very easy to get hijacked, and it's very easy not to notice at the same time. So beware of that one, without a doubt. And that kind of comes with the culture then really. You have to kind of educate and communicate and reinforce and remind and constantly kind of look for feedback from people to keep them on board the direction you're going. Sometimes it's not very popular, if you're bringing in, talking about productivity and cutting costs, cutting engineers, whatever it may be, then if it's real people involved, then they're not going to, the phrase "turkeys vote for Christmas," they're not going to do it. But you have to keep your nerve, and you have to be transparent in my view. You have to be open and honest and keep telling people what's going on. But at the end of the day, the project itself doesn't just deliver. It's the people within the project and the people outside the project, the people it impacts, deliver. Unless you get to the question earlier, unless you actually engage with people and get the hearts and minds on board, you can quickly fail. And I've certainly seen, if we move to the sort of, in my world, testing, and we look at sort of component testing, and then what we call end-to-end testing, and then we have user testing, and then we put something out for a pilot. And actually work through all those phases, and what we always find, and I'm sure you see the same, is that there's a new issue along the way that we didn't spot earlier. So I'm always a big fan of getting straight to trying something out pretty quickly and doing a lot of those things in parallel, which tends to sort of be seen as I'm a heretic. But fail fast, because if you're going to have issues, though they're going to appear at the end when they're very, very costly to resolve. And the hearts and minds of the people who are going to do that pilot piece, you have to get the right folks on board, because they can very quickly kill it as well as make it a success. But you do want to make sure you've got a couple of mavericks in there as well, just to make sure you're getting proper feedback. But you have to closely manage that stuff. And I would say, don't do big bangs. I've had the pleasure of doing a couple of those in my time, and that's why I've got no hair left these days. So just don't do a big bang. It's not good. Start small. Grow it piece by piece, because you can control, you can adjust, you can evolve it as you go. But see things through. I'll put this last because it's my biggest learning point of all, is that big projects, especially multi-year projects in my world, that are going to drive change and drive philosophical change and fundamentally provide new capability or a new way of operating. It's very, very easy to let resources peter out over time, or to have a very sharp cut-off saying the project's delivered, therefore 4 weeks later we're going to disband the project team and everyone's going to go off and do their own thing. It'll be fine. It won't. You need to make sure you have the right resources engaged throughout, because there's a very great tendency to put folks at the start and then let it reduce, and then at implementation time disappear. And that's actually when you actually still need folks on board. You have to make sure you follow things through. So, to bring it all together then and get us towards lunch. So for me, TSO, it's nice to be, I wouldn't say back home. It's the only second time I've been in this room in my life, and the second time I think I've been upstairs, provided I'm allowed in. But as a member of TSO, very, very interesting world. It's great the opportunities to get, but we are the engine room of BT. We deliver the solutions that power our frontline businesses. From our perspective, though, we have to be wide awake. The drivers of technology themselves are changing. It's not standing still, and if I was doing this in a year's time, or one of you was, then we'll be talking about slightly different things. The world is not standing still. You have to keep learning. It's the Tony Blair education speech, but you have to keep challenging yourself, and that means in terms of what's going on around you, but also be objective about how you did. That continuous improvement, that learning organisation. I think the quote was when Steve McLaren was appointed the England football manager before the rest happened. Then somebody said in I think a radio discussion that he's a great guy. He learns from his mistakes, and some wag telephoned in and said, "I don't want a guy who learns from his mistakes. I want a guy who learns from other people's mistakes and doesn't make them in the first place." That's very, very difficult, but it's a great philosophy to have. So, study what's going on out there, learn from others, and share what you've got wrong yourselves, because other people cannot make that mistake themselves. So it might be that you did it, but other people can benefit from that. And at the end of the day, you've got to be honest. You've got to assess yourself honestly in doing that. And I think when we look at analytics and measurement and presenting stuff in a very clear and concise way, then we can make fact-based decisions and move more towards the left side of the brain in an operational world. But there had to be an awful lot of right-sided stuff to create that in the first place. So, finally, a quote from somebody far cleverer than me, but life is like riding a bicycle. In order to keep your balance, you must keep moving. So that's my advice, folks. Thank you. Happy to take any questions. I think we've just got a minute or two before lunch. Yes. I'll wait for the microphone.
Hiya.
You've got one already.
Just want to ask you about the EE acquisition.
Yep.
And I guess the thinking at a corporate level as far as how far you're going to integrate and what part of the business is leading that integration.
So it's I think as all these things are, it's a pretty complex world. I mean, there's been a huge amount of discussion for months beforehand, as you can probably guess, before the sign on the dotted line. And even then, only a few people were in the know for detailed facts. The reality on the ground is that we are integrated now. We brought EE in as an additional line of business, so the mobile arm sits as a brand within BT, EE itself. But if we look at the supporting functions, what we are doing, and it'll take some time to do this. I mean, we're probably looking at a couple of years' journey, to be honest, to fully integrate. But what we are doing is taking the various components of EE and consolidating with the like components of BT. So if we look at the FM world, for example, then we're consolidating that activity in the FM world and looking to drive a consistent approach across the BT world and the EE world seamlessly, so that in a period of time, and we're still working through that, then that'll be a seamless activity. And the same thing kind of applies for the worlds of sort of HR and finance and the other things that go on. From a technology perspective, we've taken the sort of technology development pieces and brought those into my world of TSO, the engine room, to help kind of bring energy, enthusiasm, thinking, that kind of stuff, from what is a very fast-moving world, again, to sort of free the line of business up to do its thing in the marketplace. So it's a long journey, which I think it's fair to say a number of us, me included, are just starting on, so it touches my world. I've got 6 different customer areas to look after. FM is by far the biggest of those and dominates my time, but we need to integrate in all those areas. Anybody else? Yes?
At the risk of asking you to be an enthusiastic amateur, what technology do you think could be brought to cover real estate and FM that you've seen in other areas?
Thanks, Kevin. What technology do I think that we could use? I think the biggest challenge we've got, and it was touched on actually, the phrase "put me up" was dynamic scheduling. I think if we look at our field force, everyone sees the open-reach vans around the place. We've invested a huge amount in the past in workforce management. When I was a wee lad, people came in and had people in telephone, what they call controls, looking at bits of paper and then giving them 3 or 4 jobs over the phone, and then people would write stuff down and go off and do, and that was their work for the day. So they got it done by lunchtime, yahoo. But that changed massively then, and we went through a philosophy of giving people 1 job at a time on a computer. And it knew roughly how long it should take to travel there, how long it should take to do, and then when you should therefore be requesting your next job. Engineers hated it with a vengeance because they were absolutely at the beck and call of the business, and they'd find people zooming all over the place and passing each other and saying, well, I'm going to the place you were just at, and you're going to the place I was just at. So then we started doing, expanding the algorithms and stuff in that to look at patchworking and then look at sort of multiple jobs and trying to predict and giving people more packages of work. Because we're saying, actually, I'm actually cleverer than the machine. If you tell me what you want me to do, I can do it more effectively. But then that's with an analysis of how long it takes to do stuff. So for me, in the FM world, that management of resources in a field environment to get the maximum benefit out of them, I think is absolutely fundamentally key, and that's the next problem we've got to track. So I'll be having a chat at lunchtime with David. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, thank you all. I hope you. One little tip for you: if it's revolving upstairs, then there's 2 little lines on the floor, little aluminium lines, and if you're having a chat with someone and you're on the inside and they're on the outside, they'll just disappear. So be on the same side of the line as them is my advice, because I've had that problem in the past. Right.